conversation going between them and release some blog posts or follow-up emails so that people can get answers to those questions. So the other part of our event is that each speaker has an organization or some sort of a fund that they're going to highlight, and they're going to share that after each of their talks. So you're here just to enjoy stories. But if you feel compelled by anything that you hear, I will be making it very easy for you to contribute more to the things that they're representing tonight. I've brought some wonderful people who I know just from exposure to them over time. They are always doing something for others and helping their communities. And so it's just a huge pleasure of mine to shine a spotlight on them tonight. So before we get started, Gil, is there anything else that attendees need to know aside from just keeping themselves on mute to help things run smoothly?
That's basically it. Just enjoy the show. We'll try to make this run smooth.
Okay. All right, thanks. So I do need to mention that we had a change in our lineup this week. Just in the last 2 days, we had one of our speakers decide that he was not able to participate. He's having a family emergency due to COVID. So he's been on my mind a lot, and it's just a good reminder that even though we've got some good things happening and we have the vaccine, that this is still affecting us, and it's heavy. So I just want to take a second to remember that. And the two people that we've brought on, though, are, I wouldn't say they're pinch hitters. I'd say they are power hitters coming in to take his place. And these are people that when I thought of them, I just knew I could have replaced this speaker with one other person. But if I were to choose just one over the other, we would be missing out if we didn't hear what this other person was offering. So I decided I'd be talking less, fitting in more people, because I have a generous and thoughtful community, and you would just like to know what they're doing. So with that, I'm going to introduce our storytellers. So first up, I have Jessica Helen Lopez. She is the City of Albuquerque Poet Laureate Emeritus from 2014 to 2016, and she's a current educator at the Native American Community Academy, as well as an instructor with the UNM Chicana and Chicano Studies Department. She's the author of 4 poetry collections. And I managed to pull this off of my bookshelf last night and look at a few poems again. Her most recent publication, Provocateur, was released in the summer of 2019 by Swimming with Elephants Publications. Her 5th book will be published by UNM Press in the fall of 2021. She is the recipient of the Zia Book Award and the John Trudell Poetry and Activism Award presented by the San Bernardino Valley College, and she's a Pushcart Prize nominee. A Chautauqua Scholar with the New Mexico Humanities Council, Jessica is the founder of La Palabra, The Word is a Woman, an online intersectional and inclusive community with a focus on feminism and LGBTQ rights through the arts. Apologize for my nerves there, Jess. Lopez is also the founding coach of Respite Youth Poetry Collective and an all-Indigenous youth poetry performance group. She was recently nominated and accepted as a fellow for the Rural Women's Collective, an inaugural fellowship founded by the Justice for Migrant Women. It's my pleasure to share with you my friend, Jessica Helen Lopez.
Hey, gracias, Carrie. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to, give a special shout out to all folks who are present in this virtual space, especially to those people who work behind the scenes to make it happen. And, obviously to Carrie. I met Carrie first when I was participating as a speaker for the TEDx ABQ event here several years ago. And we quickly became friends. Oh, I can see my little chihuahua back there. Hopefully she doesn't do any lascivious things. I don't think so. She's actually a professional Zoomer, but that's Cleophila. So mucho gusto, everybody. Me llamo es Jessica Helen Lopez. Soy Chicana. I spelled that with an X, like the Mexica do. Soy mestiza, Mexicana Americana. I hail from California. I was born in Paramount and lived in Los Angeles in the Long Beach area before I moved to the borderlands, which was of Deming, New Mexico, very, very south Nuevo Mexico, near Palomas, Mexico, when I was about 13. And I've migrated north ever since. I currently reside in Albuquerque. I've been here now 20 years. I have a 19-year-old daughter, so I can always gauge how long I've been here in Burque by her age. She is a freshman at UNM. And yes, I do teach at UNM. I teach at NACA, but I'm currently working for the NACA Inspired Schools Network. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Stronger Together COVID-19 Relief Fund in just a sec, and what that entails as far as who we partner with, within our communities at large. But NISN, NACA Inspired Schools Network, is a network of Indigenous schools across New Mexico and what we call Indian country. So also in South Dakota, as well as in the Ute Mountain area of Colorado. We've got emerging schools in Oakland, but these are Indigenous rooted schools that are designed by their communities across tribal ancestral lands and even urban settings. Our flagship school is the Native American Community Academy. And you know what? We have, in our 15 years of existence, reclaimed buildings that once belonged to the Carlisle boarding school era, where our Indigenous young people were stolen from their families and acculturated into Western mainstream culture, hair shorn, language stripped for them. So this is a reclamation. This is indeed a movimiento. And I'm just so happy to be a part of NISN and NACA, and we're still going strong. And of course, the community that is Albuquerque and all of the community partners that we work with, including, Carrie and this new, this new setup too. So I'm really happy to be here. I want to share some poetry with you all. That's my best language. I would say that's my love language. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and still incur PTSD. And when I say survivor, I mean as a child. There was a lot of addiction on both sides of my family that I witnessed growing up. And unfortunately, there haven't been many resources along the way. One form of medicine that I've found has been reading. I cleaned up my room a little bit for you because I'm constantly having an influx of books in my house, and I need yet another bookshelf. So I moved them off my bed. But reading was a form of escapism for me. When there was no other place for a young, brown, skinny girl to turn, there weren't maybe resources, or there weren't maybe spaces for my mother to access. I was able to grab a book and escape through words and stories. And it certainly brought out in me, this lifelong dedication to empathy for others around the world. That's what they say that reading can do. Reading is a form of medicine across mediums, across genres. And then lo and behold, I wanted to become a writer. Of course I did. I value the storytellers in my family. Most of it comes from oral tradition, what we call the chisme lovers, the chismosas, the folks that say, oh, did you hear about this down the street? Or you know what your auntie is up to? In reality, that's a form of medicine for us because it keeps us on our toes and aware of what to look out for. And those were my first storytellers. They were big, gregarious storytellers. My mom is the best storyteller ever. She had a full 5-act play, and it was just retelling the story of her going to the local tiendita, the little corner store. She spoke in characters and she gesticulated and projected her voice, and I was mesmerized by that, just as I was mesmerized by reading books, and something as why I'm a teacher now, I wanted to pass along. And so I found poetry. Poetry has definitely been one of the main crutches that I've relied on throughout the years as a community organizer, as a feminist, as a queer identified, intersectional feminist who is also Chicana, and who works with Indigenous communities and undocumented mixed status communities. It's really enabled me to figure out who I am, acknowledge where I come from, and the places I want to go as what I call myself an auntie, because we're all relations. So through my poetry, I've been able to access healing. And I've been also, I would like to create safe spaces for inclusivity, especially for our young people. And so with that, I'm just going to go into sharing some of my pieces, and I think you'll get to know me a little bit more through those pieces. One, however, is an occasional piece. And I know that we've got Hakim Bellamy up here on the list, on the lineup, and he's my brother and the first Albuquerque poet laureate, the inaugural poet laureate. But oftentimes as poets, we're asked to write a piece for an occasion. Raul Salinas, the late great Chican Indio poet who founded La Resistencia bookstore in Austin. He was formerly incarcerated, found poetry, saved his life, came out, became a community organizer, and activated POC communities in order for them to rise in their power. Poetry is a change maker. He said, "Poesía está en la calle." It can be found in the streets, right? And so my lovely friend, mentor, Levi Romero, told me that, introduced me to Raul Salinas's work. And so the poets can be found on the front lines of the boycotts and the protests and at the roundhouse advocating for legislative policies that positively affect our communities. The storytellers are always there. So I was asked to write a poem for the New Mexico Dream Team, which is a network across New Mexico that advocates for our undocumented relatives. Right now, we got a bill that is advocating for a moratorium on privatized prisons here in New Mexico to put a stop to signing those contracts with private prisons for detention camps. And so here is that piece. And it was shared at several different rallies when it was first written. And I want to share it now because it's, well, unfortunately, it's always relevant, right? So I'm going to read this to you now. And of course, my doggie is barking. Of course she is. All right. This one is called Man-Made Materials for our interned relatives along the border. The chain link knows nothing of beating hearts, of lax flesh or parting fingers, knows nothing of separation, how it splits a mother's chest open like manzana beneath a sutured knife, juice of the blood, how a father becomes impotent because politicians are in bed with the businessmen and brown bodies turn a profit when they are behind fences, how babies are interned, how brown babies are interned. The chain link and the aluminum blankets can't hear. They have neither ears nor eyes, no sight, only malleable chemistry to be fashioned, shaped as accoutrements for the incarcerated child bodies, round up and laid out upon the slabs of pavement. The pavement never remembers. The paper doesn't know if it is a green card or not, doesn't know the difference between a passport and a deportation warrant. It certainly doesn't care if it is a page in the Bible or a constitution. The desert is just a desert. In all its glittering, thirsty glory, it was merely born that way. It never knew and will never know about man-made borders. A prison is only a collection of angles and hooked wire. It doesn't understand it was meant to be a cell. A cell is unknowing of itself. It cannot recognize grief. All of the keys and all of the locks in this world will never suffer. But metal can be a dangerous thing. This we know. We know that men, in the name of power and devotion to the coin, will eat the poor for dinner, will place us on plates of gold, tuck the linen into the starch of the collar, wet their lips with the blood of the guiltless, and call us a delicacy. Their wives will exclaim over the recipe, the exotic snuff of it, pick their pearly whites with our bones. We know, I know, they gobble the spirit of their brothers and sisters, never to acknowledge us as kin. This is how animal becomes less than human. This is how human is less than blood it was born in, less than machine and metal and tool. This is how their teeth are akin to chain link, their tongues a paper ballot, the ink that runs from the sides of their mouths as they chew, masticate their jaws, pay their dinner bill with plastic, the ones who own everything, who own the mineral, the land, the stainless steel toilets in all of the prisons, who think they own you, who don't understand that the heart is a manzana, an apple that grew from the tree but was never enslaved by it. The branch is a benevolent passenger. This is how an apple is different from chain link, how in this knowledge, the meek, the righteous will one day inherit the earth. Thank you, muchas gracias. And if you'd like to, I can in just a second pop the link to that into the chat box. And you can take a look on how to access, because it has a direct link to our COVID-19 Stronger Relief Fund. And this one was published on the Ubuntu Audio website, which is a global platform honoring audio books that are narrated and published by authors of color. I'm going to do a check-in time. How am I doing, Carrie or Gil?
It's at about time.
Okay.
I did capture a blurb about Stronger Together.
Great.
And so I want to make sure that I read that. I know that you gave some information ahead of it. When I called Jessica, I knew that this would be the case. She had no less than 5 or 6 organizations to choose from. So the one that she settled on is called Stronger Together. And that one focuses on Indigenous and undocumented peoples that have been at the front lines of the pandemic. There have been so many undocumented and mixed status families who've been left out of pandemic relief acts passed by our Congress. And so far, they have helped over 1,200 families in New Mexico, South Dakota, Colorado, and Oklahoma. And you can find a link to donate to that organization at our website, storystillness.com/donate. And you'll see Jessica's picture and you can click through that way. I'm gonna head up to our next speaker here. Next we have Laura Mathis. Laura is an executive communication coach and trainer with the Speech Improvement Company. She is a past TEDx speaker and has over 20 years of experience helping people to become more comfortable and effective communicators. A few of the organizations where Laura has instructed, coached, and trained, including Harvard University, MIT, Bain Capital, Dell Children's Medical Center of Central Texas, Visa Incorporated, CVS Pharmacy, Olympus Corporation, Yeti Coolers, and CNBC. I am grateful to have her here tonight so she can share a story of her experience from recent events in Austin, Texas. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carrie. That was a great intro. Thank you for that warm introduction. And Jessica, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was great. I also met Carrie during my TEDx talk, and she's the one you want on your side when something has to be done. This was a project that she put together with just complete conviction and dedication. So thank you to Carrie for making tonight happen.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to share my story now from Austin, Texas. When the winter Texas storm hit on February 13th, I started having this sense of anxiety and fear. And as a chronic overthinker, I am very good at predicting worst case scenarios. But gradually with anxiety, you can usually get evidence that you're not actually in danger, that everything will be fine, that you'll survive. But every time I checked Twitter during this winter storm, the news kept getting worse and the messages were very clear. You are in danger. And as that storm swept across Texas, fear became our default. And this fear is demonstrated in the numbers. There was 20-minute rolling power outages that turned into 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. 108 hours of under freezing temperatures, 550 vehicle crashes in 3 days. The pipes were bursting at the rate of 1 pipe per minute. 3.5 million water interruptions, 5 million people in Texas without power, some for more than 5 days. My family barely had time to prepare. The roads and highways were iced over quickly. And in my neighborhood here in Austin, we live at the top of a very steep hill. And suddenly, before we could gather the supplies we needed, no one could come or go from our neighborhood because the hill had completely iced over. Our particular street was incredibly lucky to not lose power that week of the 13th, but we did lose water for 5 days. And I spent my days in between Zoom work calls with a large Home Depot bucket, gathering snow to melt on the stove for water to hand wash dishes and flush the toilet. And it turns out in our house, it takes a full bucket of snow to make enough water to flush a toilet once. And I knew that those 6 inches of snow on the ground would be melted soon, and that our grassy, dirty snow that we kept piled in the bathtub would not last much longer. Now, as a Canadian, who moved to Texas in 2003, I know that for some of you listening, any East Coasters, 3 to 6 inches of snow is just a regular Tuesday in February. But there is a distinction that has to be made here because houses in Texas are warmed by underpowered electric furnaces, and we turn on maybe a few weeks of the year. The insulation here is designed to keep our homes cool in the summer, not warm in the winter. Our pipes are often exposed to the elements, and most Texans have never had to shovel even 2 inches of snow. In fact, the only shovel that we have now is this small steel shovel that we keep by the front door in the summer to deal with the poisonous snakes. But this fear during the storm was different for everyone, and there was no food at restaurants or grocery stores, no way to get your medicine, no gas at the pumps, no available hotels for Wi-Fi or to take a shower, no heat, no water, streets were closed, highways were closed. But what upset me the most was the awful conditions of Texans all across the state. Their fear was a real life nightmare. Families without power and heat for days who are using chairs and bookcases for firewood to stay warm. Parents braving icy roads and standing in line for hours to get food for their family. And when they get inside, almost every shelf is empty. Seniors and frontline healthcare workers that are notified of their canceled COVID vaccine. Homeowners and renters watching their ceilings collapse from burst pipes, and the plumber's next available appointment is 3 weeks away. But luckily, fear has an enemy, and the enemy is community. And the smaller scale efforts made by individuals, churches, neighbors, community groups started rising up. They started handing out and delivering diapers and formula, food and water. They were helping refill oxygen tanks and handed out warm blankets to strangers. Now, for me, my community was the 16 houses on our cul-de-sac. We have a text thread that we use, which is generally used for, an ingredient that you forgot for dinner or to say happy birthday. But now that text thread was our whole lifeline. People offered food, drinking water, pool water to flush your toilet, resources, a plumber referral. And the city really left us on our own to survive, and my little community stepped up. On day 3 of the storm, I realized I needed to fill an important prescription, but the road up and down our hill was still too dangerous to drive. And after a quick calculation, it would take me 4 hours of walking through the snow to get to the pharmacy. So after asking my neighbors on our text thread for advice, a neighbor that I barely knew named Matt, who's a firefighter, and he owns a 4-wheel drive, offered to drive down the hill and across town to get my prescription for me. And if you would have told me a month ago that Matt, that dude 6 houses down, was going to pay for and hand deliver my birth control, I would have said you were crazy. So community is stronger than fear, but community cannot and will not sustain itself. It takes effort. Get to know your neighbors, create a block directory, find ways to look after each other, check in on each other, because sometimes help is not on the way and we have to save each other. An easy first step tonight is to support the work of the Austin Area Urban League. And as Texans recover from the storm, they have a campaign called Love Thy Neighbor TX. And that's helping with disaster relief, providing shelter, food, water, and home repair to families that are in need. And you can quickly and easily make a donation on tonight's webpage. And during the storm, I got this minuscule window into what it's like to be fearful about how I would secure the most basic needs for my family: food, water, safe shelter. And now I see much more clearly that with a strong community, we never have to be fearful alone.
Thank you, Laura. I knew when I had the idea for this event that I really wanted to get perspective from one of my friends down there, and Laura is a total pro. I approached these speakers, what was it, a week and a half ago? It's not common to call people up and ask them to do this with not very much notice, and she, I thought, was the perfect person to come in and share what was happening there from the ground level. And Laura makes my job easy. She's already shared her cause. And I like that you chose that cause, because I think those of us who are not in Austin, when we've been sharing Facebook posts and we've seen, basically, like you and I mentioned, the same 10 or dozen organizations shared over and over again. And so the Austin Area Urban League, they seem to be doing some great work, and they're super active online and very responsive. I loved their mission. So I would love to see them get some more support. So thanks for choosing them.
Sure. They've been around 40 years, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Carrie.
I was glad to learn about them. Thank you, Laura. Okay. Our next speaker joins us tonight from Massachusetts. Audrey Gordon is the president and the executive director for the Progeria Research Foundation, an organization she co-founded with the goal of finding, treating, and curing children with progeria, which is an ultra-rare genetic rapid aging disease. At the time she started the organization with her sister and brother-in-law, there was a complete and total lack of resources to help these children. Ms. Gordon is a graduate of Tufts University and Northeastern University School of Law, and is an attorney licensed to practice in Massachusetts. She serves on the board of advisors of Global Genes Rare Project and has received several honors personally and on behalf of PRF, including Research America's 2014 Paul G. Rogers Distinguished Organization Advocacy Award for bringing progeria from obscurity to the forefront of successful translational research. Audrey will share the inspiring story of the creation of PRF in the wake of the diagnosis of her nephew, Sam Burns, who passed away from progeria in 2014 at the age of 17, and who continues to inspire people today through the messages that he shared in his 2013 TEDx talk, My Philosophy for a Happy Life, and the HBO documentary, Life According to Sam. Audrey agreed to speak at our event yesterday, and this is her life's work. She'll be speaking from a place of passion and dedication. She is not one of our speakers who has been rehearsing a story. This is what she lives. So I invited her because her work is crucial to all of our families, whether or not our children suffer from progeria. So I'm really grateful to have her here to be able to share what she's been doing. So Audrey, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, unlike the first two speakers, I've known you for about 30 hours, but it's a pleasure.
We share a beloved friend in common who we've known for a long time. So I trust her implicitly. And when I heard I could bring you in, I was already so inspired by Sam. I said, yes, absolutely. So
yeah, Sam has the way of doing that. Thank you. Well, hi, good evening, everybody. In September of 1998, my family's life changed forever when Sam was diagnosed with progeria. Progeria is an ultra rare condition. There's only about 400 children in the entire world that have this disease. So that's about as rare as you can get. And when he was diagnosed, my sister and brother-in-law, Sam's parents, who are both doctors, so their first reaction was, okay, let's go see what's out there. Let's go to the literature. Let's see, who's working on this. Are there any treatments? Well, there was nothing. Nobody was doing work. Nobody was advocating for the children. They really had just been forgotten. And so our family took the bull by the horns and said, we've got to create an organization that's going to help cure these kids. And this is not an uncommon story, especially for rare diseases. Most organizations that do research or advocacy organizations for rare diseases are founded by family members because, frankly, nobody else will do it. So we said, yep, we're going to do it. So I was a practicing attorney at the time, and I left my law practice to become the director. So I'm in charge of the organizational and fundraising aspects of the foundation. And Leslie is the medical director, and Scott, Sam's dad, is the chairman of the board. And we started it off with our family and friends, and it just grew from there. But when we first started, we didn't really know what to do. None of us had ever had any experience in any of this before. So Leslie started making calls. She called her colleagues, she called researchers, and she said, why aren't you working in this field? What do you need? And they said, well, we don't have any biological materials to work with. Okay, so we created a cell and tissue bank. We don't have any funding. All right, we're going to start a research grant program. We don't have any place to go to collaborate and bring together researchers to brainstorm. All right, so we conduct international scientific workshops. There's no way to get in touch with patients. We don't have any connection with them. We started an international registry. So you get the picture. Whatever people needed, we created so that there weren't any excuses. We were like a one-stop shop. We needed to create all of the tools needed to drive this organization and to drive the research. And it really paid off. Where did it get us? Well, we were able to discover the gene just a few years after our founding. We found a drug to repurpose. We started clinical drug trials at Boston Children's Hospital. And because of our registry, we were able to enroll patients within just a few months, which was great. The reason that we got to the gene discovery, was from cells from the cell and tissue bank. So you can see how all the programs sort of fed into each other for these successes. And now, 20 years later, just in November of 2020, we got the first FDA approval for a treatment for progeria. Only 5% of rare diseases have an approved treatment. And this drug extends the children's lives, gives them a longer, healthier, and more active life. Not, about 20% longer, which, it's not a cure and there's a long way to go, but these kids are living longer. We are making a difference. Sometimes within these 20 years, you got your head down, you're working really hard, but every once in a while you come to this real aha moment. And one of them happened as recently as 2 weeks ago. We now, in the Zoom age, we now have Zoom calls every 6 months with the families and the kids. And we had one 2 weeks ago. There were 34 English-speaking families from around the world on this call. It was fabulous. So the first thing we did is we went around the screen and introduced ourselves just to say hi to everyone. And it started. I'm so-and-so, I'm 19 years old. I'm so-and-so, I'm 20 years old. By the way, the average age without treatment is 14 and a half years old. And as the kids continue to say the numbers, it was palpable. You could feel it in the air and through the screen. Everybody knew the significance of those numbers. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional because it's just so exciting to see. And then there were the parents of the newly diagnosed 4-year-old. And again, everybody was thinking the same thing. Your child has so much to look forward to now, whereas 20 years ago, there was nothing. So it was really nice to see. And it's been nice over the past couple of years since this study came out that showed these kids are living longer, and you can see it in the numbers that are climbing and the deaths that are being reduced, that we don't just, for 15 years, we referred to them as children with progeria. And now we say children and young adults with progeria. And just to be able to add that in, that young adults, just speaks volumes. And it makes me happy every day to think about that. The other thing that we just found out in a study that came out just a few weeks ago is genetic editing is here. A study came out with progeria mice that Francis Collins, the director of NIH, who's been working with us, said in his 40 years of working in research, he's never seen anything so exciting. These mice were cured. Now, it's a long way from mice to humans, I get that, but scientific technology is increasing and knowledge is increasing at an exponential rate. And I just know that a cure is within sight. So really excited about that as well. If I had to tell you the key ingredients to our successes so far, and I think what's going to get us to the finish line, it's determination, inspiration, partnerships, and love. The determination that just came right from the get-go. We were determined to do something to help these kids. It's a race against time, and we just had to get out there and start. The inspiration has always come from Sam. As Carrie mentioned, you've got to see Sam's TEDx talk. It's the best 12 and a half minutes that you'll spend. Truly, it's so inspiring. It's been seen between the TED and TEDx sites over 80 million times. It's the #2 TEDx talk, and it's been on the top, in the #2 spot for a really long time. And the HBO documentary, he's just fabulous. And what I love most about them is they will live on forever. Sam's lessons and his inspiration will be there for everybody, for the entire world, till the end of time. So I'm very grateful to HBO and to TEDx for making sure that all happens. But for me personally, you know, he's just so inspiring, and that continues on to this day. And the kids, the other kids, they're incredible. They're so extraordinary. They're so wonderful, full of life, and there's no lack of inspiration here in this office or for anybody that supports us. The partnerships. I know that that's been talked about, the community. You can't just do this alone. So key. I mean, we can't do anything without our partners, and our partners are donors and volunteers and the pharma industry and academia and NIH. I mean, it's just so, and the families, of course, the courageous families that come here to test these drugs and to, you know, to help out with the research. So we just couldn't do it any other way. And one of the things that we do when we bring the kids in for the trials, this is just an example of the you know, the strategy and our mantra of partnerships, is we always try to bring 2 children in together and have 2 families in together, because I mean, it just makes sense, as you all know, I'm sure, I don't have to tell you this, but it's working together is exponentially better and exponentially more successful than working alone. And we found that in every single thing that we do. When we started, we didn't know what we were doing. It's probably better that we didn't in some ways, because nobody created their own cell and tissue bank, but we did it and it was really successful. But one of the things in going back to determination is we said, okay, well, somebody out there can help us. I know that maybe not with progeria in itself, but somebody out there can help. So we would just call people and say, I'd say to them, do you have a contract, a template contract for cells or whatever? And I get 3. 3 was my magic number. 3 different ones from 3 different places. And I'd pull out what I thought was most applicable and best from each, and I'd create my own. So that's just what we did. And that's what I do to this day. I'm on the phone with people learning. There's always something new to learn. But that has been my secret sauce, my recipe, I guess, is to always depend on other people, and they're always willing to help. So I just want to end with just noting that the description of this talk says that this unexpected challenge is supposed to stir up significant fear, but I didn't really actually, none of us had time to be afraid. We knew that we just had to get to work. And I had some experience with public speaking, like I said, and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that I was afraid of, the one thing I was so anxious about, that I wasn't comfortable with at all, was asking people for favors. So can you imagine my new life? That's all it was about, was asking people to do things for us, not just money, but time, talent, treasure. So I'm going to tell you a story that, thank goodness, this happened really early on, because it was a game changer. It was a Monday morning, and I was calling people to thank them for helping out with the fundraiser for that the Saturday night before. And I called this woman. I said, "Hi, it's Audrey Gordon, just calling to say thank you." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I'm calling to say thank you for all your help." She said, "No, Audrey, it doesn't work that way. You don't thank me. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do something to make me feel good about myself." And I'm telling you, I still get chills when I talk about that, because to me, it was this epiphany, and I never looked back. And I have asked people for things ever since, and they have gladly given. So in that vein, I'm just going to ask you to please go to our website, learn more about these children, look at their beautiful faces, enjoy, spread the word. Public awareness is just as important to us, so that people get to know about these children, about the work we're doing, its connection to aging, so it may help more than just these children. It could help a very larger population. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Audrey. So Audrey obviously knows her work inside and out, and something that I wasn't aware of, I knew what PRF was doing in general, and some of the things that she shared were already familiar to me, but our mutual friend shared with me, Audrey, that you guys have developed a curriculum for middle and high school students. Can you tell us just a bit about that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to talk about that. Yes.
Oh,
So
no.
it was about to launch just before COVID hit. So we were really, it's taken a bit of a toll. But so Life According to Sam, we took Life According to Sam and Sam's TEDx talk, and we combined the lessons that are taught through that into a curriculum for junior high and high school students in the growth mindset space, so that they can learn how to, overcome challenges and to grow and be productive and live their lives in a very positive way. So we have it. If we have it, it's just hasn't really been formally launched, and I hope that that happens in the near future, because again, it's just a great way for Sam and his incredible personality and lessons to live on and to make a difference in the world for the generation to come.
I'm really excited to be able to take a look at that curriculum when you release it. It gave me chills when I heard you were doing that, because I feel like it's easy for people to say, oh, it's progeria, and shut their brain off because it's something that they've never heard of and they think it doesn't affect them. But I think anyone who's ever encountered anything related to Sam or any other child or young adult with progeria, you can't not feel moved by what they're going through, and they will have a profound effect on the way you live your life. And so I think that this curriculum really bridges the gap between, oh, progeria is this other thing.
Right.
We all can benefit from this. And so I'm excited to know more about the curriculum when you do finally launch it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So last and absolutely not least, I have Hakim Bellamy. Before being tapped by Mayor Keller to serve as the Deputy Director of the Cultural Services Department, Hakim was the inaugural Poet Laureate for the city of Albuquerque from 2012 to 2014. He has been awarded a beautiful variety of fellowships with the following organizations: the W.K. Kellogg Foundation Community Leadership Network, the Kennedy Center, the Academy for the Love of Learning, the Western States Arts Alliance, the Santa Fe Arts Institute, the New Mexico Strategic Leadership Institute alum, and Citizen University. In 2012, he published his first collection of poetry called Swear, and as a result, he won the Working Class Studies Tilly Olson Award for Literature in 2012. He has an MA in Communications from UNM in New Mexico, and Hakim has held adjunct faculty positions there and at the Institute of American Indian Arts. Hakim has shared his work in person in at least 5 countries, that's all, and continues to use his art to change his communities. His latest book is We Are Neighbors, a collaboration with photographer Justin Thor Simonson that was a finalist for the 2020 New Mexico Arizona Book Awards. And with that, I turn it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Carrie. It's good to see your face. Great to be in this company. Man, Jessica, Laura, Audrey, thank you. All these powerful women, and they still let me go last. So thank you all for that, and for your stories. Really, like I'm humbled by you all, because you chose to do this with a Thursday night, instead of some sort of streaming platform. So thank you for making sure the campfire is still alive and well in 2021. So really feels special to be here tonight. I want to give 2 shouts out to some of our audience. My mom is listening in, so hey mom, I love you. And my fiance Francesca is also listening in, so hey Francesca, I love you too. I really feel like humbled to go after Audrey. Audrey, you've taken a life and turned it into a mission and a crusade. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about that and my dad's life and the impact it had on me and what my family decided to do in the wake of my dad, leaving the physical realm. He's he's still very much with us. So here we go. You are not alone. Grieving is perhaps the most collective thing we do. The pageantry and the pomp, the circumstance and ceremony, there is nothing more human, not even dying. Communities aren't born, they are made. That's on theme. Thank you, Laura. Oftentimes by a shared experience, learned norm by norm, soccer moms and country clubs, VFWs and places of worship. But when death is not the norm, the learning curve feels steep enough to jump off of, too overwhelming to climb without a net, without a rope, without wings, without a hand to hold. Especially when the hand you would normally hold in this very situation is currently and permanently unavailable. Almost 21 months to the day of delivering that poem, the first poem in a cycle of poems on grief, my father took his last breath. I was fortunate to be present when he did. We usually only get one or the other. I wasn't yet alive when he took his first breath. He was when he witnessed mine. But I'm fortunate he didn't have to bury me. It was the other way around, as it should be, the natural order of things. The poem was commissioned for the New Mexico Grief Resource Center's 1-year anniversary in October of 2017. As a municipal poet laureate, Jessica talked a little bit about that job, it was not uncommon to be asked for commissions for anniversaries, grand openings, park christenings, weddings, dedications, and occasionally even Valentines. But this was a new request for me, but not foreign. I'd been wallowing in a meditation on grief and dying for some years at that point, ever since 2012, when a second opinion made Dad's illness both official and terminal. I was walking grief and he was walking dead. Denial had long worn off by the time I first shared this poem in public. Anger comes and goes in waves still. There's a poem for that too, the second stage of grief being the second poem in the cycle. You get the picture. Bargaining. That was an ongoing if-then proposition I kept offering God, like, God, if you dial up a miracle cure for Alzheimer's today, I promise to give up drinking. Or God, if you can swing this as some sort of misdiagnosis or incredibly long and drawn out Ebenezer Scrooge-ass dream, I'll give up sex and save myself for marriage. Or God, he pastored your flock, made a career of memorizing your every word. How could you be so cruel to those who love you enough to die for you? So much for bargaining. As far as customs go, I think New Orleans does it right. A second line rather than a funeral procession. A second life, a celebration, less finish line, more victory lap, even after the clock stops. New Mexico is a close second. Dia de los Muertos, an offering of remembrance, gentler than awake on the loved ones who were left behind. Maybe it's just time. The difference between then and now, between ancestor and the recently deceased, an altar all by itself, wearing grandma's perfume and grandpa's favorite food, tobacco and rum because cancer may have taken the body but not his spirit. Maybe even a record, Carolina Chocolate Drops, Leaving Eden, grandma's favorite song. These are the wishes of the recently and not so recently deceased. An understanding that we desperately need each other, that the family still gathers after they are gone, and without their clout as convener, a parade or a grief center will do just fine. Stage 4 is depression. Depression is self-explanatory. Poetry doesn't do it justice, yet we can't help ourselves. A cocktail of masochism and mortality. Depression by its lonesome is enough to do you in. However, when it is attached to death and dying, we give it a different name. We call it grief. Because I had a 5-year head start on this poem, having processed the reality of losing a father, however slowly, for 5 years already, it was at a stage where my grief was shareable, but my fear was not. I didn't know what was coming. I knew Dad had already deteriorated to a shell of himself, and that the gradual evaporation of him was an evaporation of a part of me. As the saying goes, the death of a parent leaves a parent-sized hole in your reality. From that moment on, it is a forever navigated and poorly narrated void. Or as I put it in one of my poems that I produced over the course of his transition, we live in a world where before we tell our siblings, our besties, or our lovers about our most epic life events, it is customary to first tell our parents, the ones who care the most, the ones who are frankly most vested in our achievements, the trinity of triumphs. And with Dad's demise, one of the three people whom I shared my greatest achievements, like the birth of my son, like getting married, like any given graduation, was gone. Sometimes when we lose a person, we find a tribe. In a wilderness of woe, trees silently falling all around us, desperately in need of a sound, a sign, or someone to corroborate all this silence. This kind of grief feels personal and inevitable at the same time, like a wet robe that everyone has to take a turn wearing, that we would wear for another if we could, but we can't. We can only summon the strength to get dressed and face the future. Fill his and her shoes with family and friends. Fill the void with laughter as legacy to a life well lived, as gratitude for the time granted, as opposed to bemoaning what was never ours to begin with. Healing all the wounds on the inside that even time can't fix. Surviving the guilt of surviving. Making peace with the idea of our own deaths, yet waging war against the dying of those we love, and ultimately understanding that this kind of war only ends one way. We buried Dad 11 days after he gave up the ghost. That's the Holy Ghost if you grew up in the Black church like me. And during that week, the business of dying was in full swing, as though the measure of our mourning was monetary. There were caskets to buy, flowers to buy, transportation to buy, outfits to buy, obituaries to buy, food to buy, even more food to buy just to say goodbye. None of it made his absence less scary. Weed, and by weed I mean Mom, had already spent a small fortune on his end-of-life care, the thing he could actually still enjoy while he was alive. The rest of this was all for us, for grieving, for coping, for healing, for feeling like we've done right by him and who he was. And then it hit me. In the midst of my grief and my guilt for having lived so far away for so many years, for not being able to give my mother and my brothers relief from the selflessness of providing 24/7, 365 times 3 years of palliative care, that my gift was all the things I've learned over the many years of being away. The jobs I've held, the causes I've championed, the poems I've composed as medicine for communities in need. It's all led me to a unique skill set, relationships with foundations, jobs with nonprofits, the doing twice as good in whatever community I found myself in, because I held so much guilt for not doing half as good in my dad's church, the community that made me. It was fear. My fear of letting my father down that prepared me all these years to come up with the idea of creating a scholarship in his name at the Community Foundation of New Jersey, and then to act on it. With the support of my mother, who inspired the whole epiphany when she said, "What am I going to do with all this food?" in the days after Dad's passing, because that's how the Black community and others mourn when someone is widowed. They bring them meals, lots and lots of meals, because apparently it is impossible to microwave a dinner when you are mourning. And it's a beautiful thing. My dad was a conventional breadwinner. He took pride in providing. So the generosity of food is totally in his lane and legacy, but he already did that. Provided in a spectacular way, a way that outlasted him and put 3 young Black men through private schools, overpriced colleges, and the occasional family vacation. In short, Mom was not going to starve. So I said, what if we ask folks to give money instead of meals to the church, and use the money to send young promising scholars of need to school, since Dad was literally in school, having achieved his PhD in divinity studies until the end. We put notice in the death announcement all across the Philadelphia South Jersey press and social media that the family was accepting donations for the Dr. Reverend, or Reverend Doctor, depending upon which church you go to, the Reverend Dr. Edward F. Bellamy Memorial Fund. And the community that Dad loved so much and gave so much time to showed up. In the summer of 2020, a year after his passing, the fund awarded $2,000 scholarships, and this past winter, another $500 scholarship to rising college students. Dad and Mom continue to be the greatest examples I ever met of how to have an impact beyond the physical form. Dad was always a student. Dad was always a teacher. On Father's Day of 2019, June 16th, I wrote this poem, this last poem, in witness of a life well lived. All the things he taught me and the things he taught me not to be afraid of, like dying and letting him down. This poem, the very last one inspired by his life, unlike all the ones that have come since, is not part of any cycle. It's just an end. He died exactly a month later on July 16th. It was a Tuesday. The legend of Pastor Ricky. That time he gave up his childhood for his manhood, gave up catfishing for chasing women. That time he gave up a few vices for Mom and all them girlfriends for God. That time he gave up the Grand Prix for the back seat. Before that time he gave up nightclubbing for his country. And soon after that, when his country gave him up. That time he gave up on being a pilot to being the IT guy that really flies them. The irony of being the guy that sets the metal detector off at the airport because that one time they put a metal pin in his right wing. That time he gave up going long for shooting threes. That time he shoveled the driveway to shoot free throws with me. That time he gave up his gun to give us a chance. That time he stood there and flexed right before he human cannonballed off the diving board. That time he gave up cigarettes for sermons. That time he gave up on the fish tank for a new flock. All the times he gave up the Holy Ghost and did more than just pray for us. That time he gave up liquor for love. That time he gave up Conway, South Carolina for Philadelphia, but never gave up them nasty ass boiled peanuts. That time he gave up his sanity for the city, gave up barber shops for clippers, gave up name brand breakfast cereal for family vacations. That time he gave up talking for a living. That time he gave up his mind, left only to his dreams. That time he gave up his memory of me. That time he gave us a roadmap of how to lead a family, even after all them times we got hella lost when he took us traveling. That time he gave up having to be right to just wanting me to come home. That time he gave up being dad to become a grandfather, gave up being a slave to become a bona fide doctor, gave up being a man to become our collection of origin stories. That time he gave us a living, breathing legend that we could hug and hold on to.
Hakim, you were the first call I made when I thought of hosting this event because I haven't seen you face to face since I left New Mexico back in 2012, but your family has had a powerful effect on my life, and you very much have been an influence on me as a person and as a parent. And I think your father would be very proud of everything you've done. Your bio has gotten quite long since the last time I introduced you. You've accomplished so much, and so hearing this, it means a lot to me that you participated in this tonight and allow me to honor your family a bit. So thank you for being here. So I do want to mention that Hakim's is the only cause tonight that has a little bit of strangeness when you go to donate. Most of the links are direct donation links. When you go to Hakim's donation link, it takes you to the New Jersey Community Foundation, and you have to click on the amount that you want to donate, and then you click on the funds. There's a long, long list. You want to click other, and then Hakim, can you identify the name that they would put into the other box to make sure it goes to the right place?
Sure. The Dr. Reverend or Reverend Doctor, whichever order you choose to do it in, Edward F. Bellamy. Edward's my first name, so I got that from him. So Edward F. Bellamy.
Okay, and if anyone has any trouble, you can hassle me. I will email you right back. Feel free to contact me if that is where you want to contribute. Before we wrap up, please stick around for a moment. I want to make sure that I give proper thanks and let you all know what to expect from here. I'm going to send a follow-up link answering any questions that came up tonight, giving you ways also to connect with the speakers or to their organizations. If you're interested in anything that you heard them say, it will also include a a link to this Zoom recording so you can watch it again and share it. I'll also include a survey so you can tell me whether or not this event had value for you and if I can change it in any way if I decide to do it again. Thank you so much to our speakers. And I have a handful of people I also must thank because I pulled this together with help. And that includes my dear friend Liza Morris, Nikisa Abdullahi, Gil Flores, Max Baptiste, Nicole Catrapo, my husband, Tony Lin, and my daughters, Mari and Casey. I have been quite busy this week and they have shared me graciously. And with that, that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for hanging in there an extra 5 minutes. I am so happy that you're all here. And that's it for tonight. Take yourselves off Zoom.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. It means a lot to us.
Muchas gracias. Cuídate. Bye, gente.
Bye, Carrie. Thank you.
Gracias,
Bye.
Carrie.